Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing a deep dive into one specific law, ARS 13-1402, which is Arizona's statute on indecent exposure. And as you're about to see, what separates a simple accident from a very serious crime often comes down to a single, crucial word in the legal code. So let's just jump right in. The entire law is really built to answer this one question. And the answer, well, it's a lot more detailed than you might think. It turns out it's not just about what a person does, it's about what they were thinking when they did it. Here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with a basic definition, then we'll really dig into that critical element of recklessness, look at the huge range of penalties, and wrap up with the most important takeaways you need to remember. Okay, first things first. Let's get the foundation right and look at exactly what the law says. What is the legal definition of indecent exposure here? And right off the bat, you can see how specific this is. It doesn't just list the body parts. It adds this really critical second layer, the person's state of mind. You see, to be a crime, the act has to be done recklessly. Without that word, there's no conviction. It's everything. So you can think of this like a three-point checklist for any prosecutor. To get a conviction, they have to prove every single one of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt. If just one part is missing, let's say they can't prove recklessness, then the whole case just falls apart.
Okay, so let's zoom in on that third element, recklessness. This one word is so often the linchpin of the entire case. It's the bright legal line that separates a serious crime from what might just be an embarrassing accident.
And here we go. This is where we meet a really famous idea in the law, the reasonable person. You know, the court isn't trying to be a mind reader. Instead, it asks a simple question. Did this person know there was a big, unjustifiable risk of offending someone, and did they just blow it off? Basically, did they do something a normal, reasonable person just wouldn't do?
This really lays out the difference perfectly, doesn't it? On one side, you've got someone who sees the risk and just plows ahead anyway. On the other, you've got a genuine accident. This is exactly why a wardrobe malfunction, for example, isn't a crime under this law. That key element of recklessness just isn't there.
So what happens if a prosecutor can prove all three elements? Well, the consequences are serious, and they work on this kind of sliding scale that really depends on the specific details of the situation. And the single biggest factor here, the age of the witness. If they're 15 or older, it's a misdemeanor. But, and this is a huge but, if the witness is under 15, the charge immediately jumps to a felony. That means way more serious penalties and a much, much longer time window for prosecutors to even file charges. And it's not just about the victim's age. A person's own criminal history can change everything. You'll notice that having 2 prior convictions of any kind automatically bumps a new charge up to a felony. But look at that last line. If those prior convictions were felonies themselves, the new charge skyrockets to a Class 3 felony. The law is clearly designed to punish repeat offenders very, very severely. This chart really puts that escalation into perspective. For a first-time felony conviction for this, the maximum sentence is 2 years. But for someone who's a repeat felony offender, that exact same act could lead to a 15-year prison sentence. That is a staggering difference, and it all comes down to a person's prior record. But believe it or not, jail or prison time isn't the only major penalty on the table. For many people, the most life-altering consequence is the requirement to register as a sex offender. Now, this isn't always automatic. For a first offense, a judge actually has the discretion to decide whether or not to require registration. But the law has these clear tripwires. A third offense, or just a second one that involves a minor, takes away all of that discretion. It becomes mandatory lifetime registration, period. And when we say registration, it's not just a one-and-done thing. It is an intensive, ongoing, lifelong obligation. It means handing over huge amounts of personal data, your address, your job, even your online screen names, along with your DNA and your fingerprints. And it never stops. You have to renew it every year and report any little life change immediately. It becomes a constant presence in your life. All right, we have covered a ton of ground here. So let's boil it all down to the absolute key takeaways from Arizona's law, ARS 13-1402. If you're going to remember 4 things, make it these. 1. The crime hinges on recklessness, not just the exposure itself. 2. The victim's age is the absolute key factor that can flip a misdemeanor into a felony. 3. A person's prior convictions escalate the penalties in a massive way. And finally, kind of an interesting detail, the law specifically carves out an exception for breastfeeding. And that really leaves us with one final thought. So much of this law, as you've seen, rests on this subjective standard, what a so-called reasonable person would find offensive. It's a question that juries, lawyers, and judges have to grapple with every single day, and it's a powerful reminder of how deeply our societal norms and our legal standards are intertwined.